you wanted the best, you've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hello, this is Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Ladies and gentlemen, the latest things that makes it official. Welcome to the big show. As always, we bring in the most amazing authors' minds and stories in the show to share with you all and your audience or your friends, family, and relatives. So that's why you should refer them to the show so they can get smarter too and they can get more learned. Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind. Today's featured author comes to us from bookstolifemarketing.co.uk. With expert publishing to strategic marketing, they help authors reach their audience and maximize their book success. The book that we'll be reviewing today, talking about, is called Be There, My Lived Experience with My Sister's Bipolar Disorder by Dr. Linsey Willis. She's going to be joining us in the show and talking about her insights and experience. And maybe if you experience some of the things in your life, you can utilize the blueprints that she's managed to develop to get through some of these things and help other people. Dr. Linsey Willis is an author with 45 years of experience as a human resource management and organizational consultant, expert witness, coach, and educator. She has provided services to clients in the private sector, city, county, state, and federal government agencies and companies in the U.S. and internationally. Her passion for excellence and dedication to developing leadership qualities in others has served people in many ways. Police personnel have been promoted to management ranks through the U.S. College students have received stipends from her book royalty fund. That's very nice. And court cases where she was an expert witness have been settled. She's also the author of Mastering the Assessment Center Process, the fast track to promotion, and developing your innate abilities to experiencing assessment center exercises and harnessing the innate abilities, I think. So welcome to the show. How are you, Dr. Willis?
I'm great. How are you, Chris?
I am excellent. It's wonderful to have you. Give us .coms or any websites, social media. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
They can go directly to my website, BeThereBook.com. And if they want to learn anything else about me, they can go to my ljcraig.com website. That has to do with my business.
So give us a 30,000 overview. What's inside this book?
But there's a lot to unpack inside the book, although it's an easy, quick read. It provides an overview of my family background and where I feel like the illness started with my sister, and historical references to my great-grandmother who was bipolar, although she wasn't diagnosed officially because back then they didn't know what it was. And then it takes you on a journey through, learning about the categories of bipolar disorder, and the different chapters in the book deal with my sister's characteristics that she demonstrated, and 3 self-help chapters for people. And then the last part of the book covers the 20 years I missed because I started writing the book 40 years ago and then set it down for 20 years and then picked it up again, finished it. Mm-hmm. So you can read each chapter separately, but it takes you really on a journey through my life alongside my sister's life and what I had to deal with and how I was always there for her.
How give us a definition of what bipolar disorder is so we can lay a foundation for that. And give us an insight to the journey. When did you get diagnosed with bipolar? What were some of the issues, that were going on? Kind of give us the beginning of that journey, maybe that you cover in the book.
Bipolar disorder is a disorder. It's a chemical imbalance of the brain, and the manic side, and then there's the depressed side, and the experts have determined there are 3 to 4 types of bipolar disorder. I provide an overview in my book about that, although I'm not claiming to be a psychiatric expert. But, the manic phases can be really, really crazy where the person doesn't sleep for hours or days. The depressed side could be the opposite. They may sleep for days. And during these phases, they exhibit very, very bizarre behavior. They do very weird things. And so many examples of those behaviors and things that my sister did and I experienced and dealt with, and so did my parents, are in the book. Regardless, when we found out about it, my sister demonstrated weird behavior when I was growing up as a teenager in different states, and she was using drugs back then, marijuana, hash, and how it's legal. Can you believe it? I read, what I read in the paper today, the Wall Street Journal? I read an article about teenagers using marijuana, and one of the effects of this can be depression and bipolar disorder.
Huh.
Now, I found that very interesting when I read it, because back when we were growing up, it was illegal. But my sister, I don't think the use of the marijuana and the hash and smoking hash, what have you, caused her bipolar disorder, because we had it in our family background, and it is.
Really?
Yeah, they found that it is genetic, but it can also you can also get bipolar disorder through other things that happen to you, as well as what they just said in the paper today.
Did she experience any trauma, or was there anything that triggered it? Maybe
there was
some people. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Could you finish your question?
Oh, sure. Some people use drugs to medicate their trauma. You see a lot of that in rehab clinics and stuff like that. You find that a lot of them have unresolved, unhealed trauma, usually from childhood, and they're using the drugs to cope, which is a poor coping mechanism. But we don't get instruction manuals. That's why we do the show. Was there something maybe that happened to her, or maybe you think it was hereditary? I
know in the 60s, when we were living in two different states, actually, yes, Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, people were smoking pot, and, it was illegal. It was, we're smoking pot and what have you. But she had some trauma in her life. We had to move. She was uprooted her senior year in high school and had to leave her boyfriend.
Oh.
And then after had to make new friends, although we were always good at making friends. So that was probably traumatic. But then her boyfriend ended up going out with one of her best friends.
Oh.
And then her boyfriend died of a drug. Her best friend that she moved away from had died of a drug overdose. She found out about that. And then her boyfriend died of a drug overdose.
Wow.
She had some we lived in affluent communities. It wasn't, and mental illness is not segregated. Only poor people get it. Anybody can get it.
Yeah.
Those were traumatic events, and then she just really started disliking my father very much, because he uprooted her in her senior year in high school, but he wanted to get her with this guy because he thought this guy was causing her to use the drugs and what have you. Those were traumatic, and then other things happen. Other friends die. We had some friends that died in car accidents, things like that. So some people don't handle those traumatic events very well.
Yeah, I mean, especially I remember being in love in high school. Boy, it's everything, your whole world. And so, yeah, I can see how that could be traumatic. And so, how many years was she alive? And give us kind of a rundown of the journey. I mean, I don't want you to give away the book. People should need to buy the book to find out. But what were some of the? What were some of the things that you did to deal with it and process it?
To answer your first question, she lived till age 67, and I believe she lived that long because my parents and I were always there for her. We always provided extra funding, and I guess she had hardiness and resilience, and she fought the illness. But what did I do to cope with all this? Oh, a variety of things. Isn't that what the question you asked me?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I cover a lot of coping mechanisms in my book, but I think the most important one for many years was my deceased husband, who died almost 2 years ago. We were marathon runners, and we did triathlons. We were always exercising, and so that helped. When you're running a marathon and training and doing long distance, the endorphins kick in, and it's like a drug. And it's that was a key coping mechanism, because it feels great to exercise, and it feels great to, get the runner's high, and just, it's very healthy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Not when you get older, though, because then your bones, and you can start getting injured when you get older.
Yeah, I've seen that movie as I got older at the gym. Picked up the hernias. Why did you write this book? Why was it important to get this on paper and share this with other folks?
Well, my mother and I initially wanted my sister to write her life story to give her something to do after she could no longer work anymore, and then moved in with my parents when they moved to Florida in 1989. But we knew that she wasn't going to do that, so I picked up the task, and I just started to write. And I provided the first draft to my parents back in maybe around 1993, and they thought it was pretty good as a first rough draft. And I just continued, and then I just put it down for 20 years. I just couldn't, life got in the way, and I just couldn't do it anymore. But I said, one of these days, I'm going to get this book finished. And I wanted to tell the story of her life. I wanted her to be remembered because she could have been a very successful person, and her life started out that way. Very smart, very athletic, very attractive, great figure, Ivy League, smart woman, Ivy League educated person. Just
wow.
She had the whole world at her hand, in her pocket, so to speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's unfortunate. And you look at sometimes some of these things that are out there and stuff. You talk about the 4 C's. Can you tease a little bit of that out and what that is?
First of all, you have to realize you didn't cause the illness, but it took me a long time to accept the fact that whenever she blamed me for her outburst, that I'm not the one that caused the outburst. The illness is genetic, for her it was at least. And chemical imbalance of the brain. And we knew it was genetic because my great-grandmother, the stories of her were very similar to my sister.
Oh.
So you got to get to the point where you say, you're not the cause of all this.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can't control it. So you do your best to cope while the person is going through a manic and depressed episode, but you can't control control the narrative of the situation. You can to the best of your ability. Like when my sister tried to shoplift, I said, no, you can't shoplift. That type of thing. Or, she tried to hit my mother with a shoe. You try to stop that. But so you can't control everything, and you can't cure it.
Yeah.
Nothing will cure it. Medication will, reduce the symptoms or, make it easier for the person to cope and live. And then the most important one is you must cope with it, because I would suspect that a large percentage of people who have family members who are bipolar as well as mentally ill, I know many people that have been through this, families absolve themselves of responsibility, have nothing to do with the person anymore, or the spouse divorces them, and that's it.
Yeah.
And how is that person? I have no idea, and I don't care. Where are they? I have no idea where they are, and I could care less where they are. I want them out of my life.
Wow. There does seem, come to a point where sometimes with certain people, I've had to exercise people from my life too. You can care for them and try and help them, but sometimes they can be dangerous too. I've seen, what was that one show I used to watch where I think it was called Intervention, they would do interventions with people.
Yes.
And all sorts of problems. And, you see these people and they have some mental issues. They're using drugs to cope. And the people are like, hey, I love you, but I can't have you in my house because you stole the silverware last week. And, I had one friend I didn't know was on heroin. He came over the house to watch some movies. Like a week later, I'm like, where's my DVD player? How was my DVD player gone? And he's stolen a DVD player. It wasn't expensive or anything, but I could get $10 for whatever. He stole that out of my house, and I called him up, said, "You either go get it, or I'm calling the police, and you're going to jail." But yeah, he had a heroin problem, and there kind of is a point where sometimes you feel like you almost have to alienate some of these folks from your life once they get so bad. What are your thoughts on that?
You made some really good points. I know that people that use drugs, when they do steal, not all of them, of course, because what they steal, they use that money to buy more drugs. And part of bipolar disorder, one of the characteristics is kleptomania.
Oh, really?
Yes, my sister stole. Now, I'm not an expert. I have quite a bit of knowledge, but I'm sure there are cases of people who have bipolar disorder who they have never stolen or never admit that they stole. But Betsy stole things. And she stole my mother's diamond wedding ring.
Yeah.
She tried to steal money out of my purse. She would take my clothes and, just steal my clothes and then say, I borrowed it.
I have girlfriends that do that, but that's different. No, I'm just kidding.
So that's part of one of the characteristics. Pathological lying is another characteristic, and somebody could steal because I never stole that from you. And so they're lying to cover up their behavior, and because it's pathological, they can't help themselves. It's just part of their persona.
Yeah, it's really sad. Is there any sort of? Did you guys find that any sort of medication really helped, or any therapies of any types that you find?
For the first 12 years of Betsy's life, she was on lithium, which is a drug that's made out of salt. I don't even know if it's still in the market, but that was her miracle drug, and a mild tranquilizer, and then it all fell apart, and she couldn't use it anymore because it became toxic.
Oh, really?
There are a multitude of drugs on the market that people can take. They're advertised on TV now, for example. There's so many of them that people take, and the psychiatrist will determine which is the best medication based upon what the patient says their symptoms are or how they feel. But not every drug works for everybody, and you should have blood tests on a regular basis. And my sister was really smart. Whenever she felt like she was becoming suicidal or too manic, she would check herself into a hospital.
Really?
But then over the years, she became an addictive personality. She found that she liked painkillers, and she what she did? One time I bought her the book called The Manual on Psychiatric Disorders, and I forgot the name of it, and I wouldn't buy it for her again because she lost it. But she could go in there and she could read about all the disorders and all the characteristics and stuff, and then she would try to self-medicate because she had a master's in social work, and she worked as a psychiatric social worker for 12 years.
Really?
She worked with people in hospitals. So I wonder how many people that are in that field as social workers or clinical psychologists, they themselves have a problem, and that's why they went into the field.
Yeah. So there's a lot of that goes on, and I'm not, certainly don't write me, folks. I'm not saying that everyone in the field is from that background, but I remember coming up in my early years, and there was a lot of girls that, in fact, I say this to a lot of women that tell me they're in psychiatry. If they're single, I go, what happened to you as a child? That's my first response when they tell me they're in psychiatry. And a lot of people go into psychiatry that have childhood trauma and damage because it's cheaper to go learn it than pay for the next 10 to 15 years of therapy, I guess. I don't know. That's just my theory. But, if you want to fix yourself, going and getting a degree in psychiatry could be helpful. Maybe it can give you some insight to what's in there. But I have met a few crazy ass psychiatrists too. But again, I'm sure there was a few people.
Regarding a therapy, my sister, when she was in psych hospitals, she would be in the group therapy sessions, and she loved doing that because she said she would run the session, and then where she lived for 15 years until the place burned to the ground, and that's covered in my book, and that's a horrific story. One of the guys, the social workers that worked there for many years, said, "Your sister is so smart. We have the group therapy sessions, and she helps run the session, even though there's a psychologist there. She's really good at running the session and helping people."
Wow. You look at the potential of these folks, and why we don't work more to help them. So much of our society today, people that have drug problems, and many times they're using them to treat trauma, and then it's unresolved. We don't support these people. We just either throw them in jail 90% of the time, and then if their parents have money or they have some money, they'll throw them into rehab. But when I was growing up, we used to have, and this is a whole political discussion on Reagan and all that, but when I was growing up, we had county medical institutions where if you were kind of having trouble as a teenager, or anybody really, but some of my teenage friends got placed there. They place you down there for a week or two or a month and see if they could work on you. And that was all disabled under Reagan. And then we just
all down.
Yeah, then we just started throwing people in prison after that. And so it's unfortunate because, like you mentioned or imply, there's so much wasted talent and contribution these folks could make if we could just get them some good help and support. And families now are stuck with that, supporting that. I mean, when did you start being a caregiver?
Let me address that issue of families. Nobody wants to pay for it. Mental health has been cut from the budget of late. If you have a good insurance plan where you can get some visits to therapy, and then after a certain number of visits you can't go. If you don't have health insurance and you can't even afford Obamacare, then what do you do?
Yeah.
You do nothing, and if your family can't afford to pay for the doctor's visit, so you're stuck. And of course, there are those cases of people that refuse to go on any medication because they don't think there's anything wrong with them. They think it's everybody else is at fault. We don't have enough mental health facilities in the United States. We have these walk-in medical clinics now, that's for urgent care, but if goes to an urgent care center, are they going to get psychiatric care? I don't know to the extent. If they don't have insurance, they're not going to get anything.
Yeah. It's really unfortunate. We should have had more of that. And throwing people in jail just ends up costing us lots of money, and they don't get better. They just, in fact, sometimes, jail is just a recidivism college to just get better at being a criminal. What was the most difficult, memorable experience, maybe being a caregiver to your sister? It's very hard to be a caregiver.
Oh, I covered many examples, but there's, just never knowing when the phone was going to ring and there's going to be something else happening or had been happening already that I'm going to have to respond to, and my parents too. But then when my parents passed on, they made me promise that I would always be there for her. And of course I would. I'm going to take care of Betsy. And thank God, Chris, she had Social Security disability insurance. Oh. I would suspect the majority of people that didn't have a work history, because they weren't lucky enough to be my sister with our family background, going to college and having having those funds, they're not going to have any way of coping with that. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought, but she was lucky enough to have gotten the education to be able to get work experience subsequently, because she had work experience in high school. And then when she got out of college and grad school, she had work experience, and she worked while she was going to college just to have extra money. My mother was able to get her on Social Security disability. Now, it's not a lot of money, but let me tell you, if she didn't have that, we would have had to pay for everything. And then it would have bankrupted my parents. So most of these people, I would suspect, don't have any work experience or can't get a job because they don't have the education. And even if they do, they lose jobs. Like, for example, a dear friend of mine, he was helping a woman for many years he met at Publix. And he found out that she has, based on all the experiences he had with her, she's got bipolar disorder. She would never go for help. She's had so many problems: alcoholism, car problems, losing her license, up and down behavior, manic or depressed. But she said, I'm not going for help. And the minute he started advising her to go for help, their friendship ended.
Oh, wow.
And the family disowned her, wants nothing to do with her, because she would never go for help. And I can guarantee you there's hundreds, if not thousands, of cases of people like that. That if they have a job, they're going to lose that job or lose the next job and the next job because of their mental illness.
Now, you talk in the book about something called the Be There movement. Tell us about that.
It's something I've initiated in the past couple months, and it just came to me in a thought that you have to be there for the person. And I want everybody in the world who has mental illness and who reads the book and has been a caregiver can be part of this movement. And my vision for the movement is as follows. You buy the book, you learn about my book and more about bipolar disorder by going to my podcasts about bipolar disorder. And then eventually, if I'm lucky, like you are, Chris, and have worked hard, people will tune into my podcast to learn more about bipolar disorder. And they can donate, and then they can maybe be on the show to talk about their illness.
There you go.
The whole world gets part of it. And also we're doing wine tastings.
Oh, really?
So I got a big picture process that I'm working on. We've already had wine tastings, and then you get money from the wine. You sell wine, but then people buy raffle tickets, and then they can win a basket of wine, 2 bottles of wine, red and white, a box of chocolate, a tote bag with, my sister's foundation logo on it. And, I covered in my first podcast, and all the money that comes into this, into the Be There movement through donations, book sales, wine tasting, will be donated to my Betsy Craig Foundation, which will be distributed to charities and to organizations that disseminate money in my community and so forth.
That's wonderful. How long have you had the foundation going, and what's the name of the podcast?
I created the foundation last fall. I'm doing business as under the state of Florida, and it's a legitimate doing business as. And the podcast, like 2 months. I think I did my first one in January.
Congratulations.
And then the second one was interviewing somebody whose daughter has bipolar disorder, and she's successful, and she has a job, and she's getting her master's degree. So she's a success story. So I'm going to have people on my podcast that are experts in the field, as well as people that have experienced the illness, and so forth.
This is what we love about the Chris Voss Show. People sharing their stories. Stories are the fabric of our lives, as I always say. But also, without them, we'd be nothing. But sharing our stories is basically sharing blueprints of how, survival happened, how we rose from the ashes many times, how we learned lessons. And they're the way we kind of learn. We don't get an owner's manual to life. So stories are what we share. And so it's so great that you have a podcast. You can share those stories and share potential, advice on how to fix stuff. I mean, I go to my social media a lot of times and I'm like, yeah, my dog did this. What are you guys doing to work on this, whatever it is? And having that community that can help you and give you advice or ideas. The Chris Voss Show, people are like, you've had 28 shows. Is there anything you have, do you ever get tired of talking about the same thing sometimes, or same topics, it's another book on leadership, but a lot of times I get different perspective from those as well. So that's the beauty of these things. And I just love them. And I think they're great because you can change and impact lives through these mediums like books and podcasts, and you'll never meet most of the people, but you'll change their life. How has writing this book impacted or changed your life, would you say?
Adding on to what you just said, Chris, if they tune into the podcast and they hear some people talking that were willing to be on the podcast, and they've read the book and they've gone to a wine tasting and they've learned, a variety of modalities, so to speak, they realize I'm not alone. There's a place for me to go. I can go listen to a podcast. I can, go learn about mental health centers. I can, do a variety of things to make my life better. And it's a big vision. It's the rest of my life's map that I plan on doing this for the rest of my life. It's one of the things I do, just keep pushing this book. And so I apologize. Would you repeat the other question for me?
The other question was, how's it changed your life? And I think, I might have thrown in a 2 question there. Sorry.
I think my sister made me a better person. Made me realize that I part of my genetic makeup is to care for others and, be there for people. And it's changed my life, because continues giving me a purpose in my life. That she's deceased. I'm alone now. I don't have any other sisters or brothers. And I'm remembering her and using her memory in the book to help other people and spread the word and make it bipolar disorder be as important an illness as, people are willing to talk about. People will talk about their diabetes. They'll talk about their heart attack. They'll talk about their cancer diagnosis. They'll talk about all their other diseases or illnesses they have, but they don't want to talk about their bipolar disorder. They don't want to admit that they have a chemical imbalance of the brain because people may run away from them. And
Yeah.
I want that not to be the case, that people will be more open about it and say, here I am.
So you think it will change the lives of people suffering from the illness if they can read your book, and it will make a severe difference?
So in that they can learn how to cope with it and how to deal with it, and, learn about the resources for getting help, and recognizing that, oh my God, maybe somebody reads and they said, oh my God, I always thought my daughter or my husband or my sister had something wrong with them. And now I think I can direct them to get some help and go to counseling with them. And just by reading it, the person reading it says, oh God, I feel so much better because I know I'm not alone. There are other people out there like me. I'm not saying it's going to change the world. I'm not like the Steve Jobs phone did. Of course not. But it can make the world better for those suffering from this illness.
Yeah. And you bring up a good point. We find that we're not alone. So many times, we get caught in our victim state, sometimes, we're just getting beat up by life and we just feel really victimized. And sometimes we can get a little stuck there. And so having someone who can reach out a hand and go, hey, I know how to solve this problem for you, and realizing you're not alone. And that's the great thing about stories is when you hear them, you go, oh, I thought I was the only one and life was just picking on me. So, yeah.
Can I give you an example of this?
Yes, please.
I just couldn't believe it, but it didn't surprise me. I was in the hospital last year in August for 2 weeks. I had a standard customary endoscopy. And then when I woke up from it, the light sleep, I couldn't speak, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't swallow. They had perforated my esophagus.
Oh, no.
So one of the worst experiences of my life, but actually in so many ways that experience changed my life. I met 3 people in the hospital. I can't believe it. A woman that came to visit me, she was a volunteer, and she asked me if there's anything, Candy Striper, the old fashioned Candy Striper. Is there anything I can get you? You want me to chat with you? Because you're in bed all day. I was in a PICC line, and we just started chatting. And I don't know how the subject came up. She and her husband take care of her husband's daughter who's bipolar.
Oh, really?
Completely support the daughter. She can't work, but he's well off, and she has a nice apartment. Most people don't have that. And then one of the nurses that was taking care of me, he was a contract nurse. We were chatting, and he's dealt with a lot of people with mental illness and as a nurse. And then another person, the nurse, heard me talking on the phone to somebody that called up about dealing with my marketing for my book. And she said, oh my God, you wrote a book about bipolar disorder? And I said, yeah. And she said, my sister died of bipolar disorder. No,
oh, wow.
My sister committed suicide. My mother died, and my sister, who suffered from it her whole life, couldn't live without my mother and killed herself. So 3 people in the course of 14 days in a hospital, you meet, you're not alone.
Yeah, you're not alone.
It's all over the place.
Wow.
My book, they all bought the book too.
Good. That's good. That's good. What suggestions would you have to help caregivers navigate the mental health system? We're caregivers to my sister who has MS in a care center, and it's hard to be a caregiver. Wow. Be patient, make contact with someone there at that center who you can establish a relationship with, who will be your lifeline. I did that with a woman where my sister lived. You get to know the person, then you'll have a direct contact. Be patient, understand that the bureaucracy is very, very chaotic sometimes, but people really are doing their best to work through the process of dealing with all the paperwork, and things don't happen overnight. Finding housing doesn't happen overnight. Can't get help through one person, talk to somebody else. Don't yell and scream at anybody. Don't be nasty to the person who's trying to help you, because that person's your lifeline. Yeah.
And you're not alone. And don't say that all the government bureaucrats that work in these systems are all incompetent and, are ruthless or ignorant or whatever. That's not true. There are a lot of helpful, educated people working in government. I worked in government first part of my career. A lot of people think they're stupid, they're losers. No, a lot of them are highly educated. The majority are highly educated. Yeah. And they're doing it not for the money. They're doing it because they really care, and they're providing a public service. So don't abuse the people that are helping you, and have respect for them.
Yeah. Definitely.
That was a mouthful.
That's a good advice. Sometimes there's a lot of drama that can go on in these environments too. Sometimes, we've seen people at the care centers that that they're really awful at what they do, or they just don't do their job. I mean, we've got a million stories on that stuff. So as we go out, give people a final pitch out to pick up your book. Tell them, is there anything we missed? Maybe other questions I should ask you?
What can you do?
How can viewers help you with the Be There movement?
The book, buy the Kindle book. The audio book is being finished by a company in England, and that'll be out soon. I'm going to have a donation site put on my website. Even if you donate $1, we can raise money, and that money will be put into the foundation. I will let everybody know where the money's been disseminated, how it's been spent. And, just be part of it. Watch the podcast. You can even email me and tell me people you know that you think would want to be on the show. That would help me. People that would be willing to talk about their illness, and we can have them on the show. And, whenever we have wine tastings, we're trying to do 4 a year. We did 4 or 5 last year throughout the United States. We did one in Midtown Manhattan last year to attend a wine tasting. Be there for the people that are ill.
Help them do it. It's been wonderful having the show, and so brave, Linsey, to share your story so that hopefully we can help a lot of other people out there raise awareness, and also, raise awareness about being a caregiver. One of the problems a lot of caregivers have is they're kind of at their wits' end. They're constantly caring for a person. They're constantly aware of, like you mentioned, the calls, and they can come in and stuff. And it can be a highly stressful environment, and we often talk with caregivers about how, you got to put the oxygen mask on first before you can help other people. Because a lot of caregivers will wear themselves down to the bone, emotionally, physically, and then they're the ones suffering the most. In fact, caregivers usually do suffer the most in taking care of other people. They usually develop Alzheimer's and dementia much faster taking care of people that have those things.
Well, I was taking care of my husband. He had dementia and he died while I had long-term care help, but I was caring for him here and my sister long distance at the same time. So talk about resilience and perseverance. That's what you have to have. Plus, take care of yourself. You take a walk, exercise, don't drink too much, go out and buy yourself something, spend some time with some friends, pet an animal. There's so many ways to reduce your stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's so good, important that you have to take care of yourself. But a lot of families are going through that right now with multiple family members. They call them the sandwich generation. They're sandwiched between young kids and technically diapers and parents who are technically in diapers. And maybe they should call them the diaper generation. But they're sandwiched between these two groups of people they have to care for suddenly. Because a lot of people are living longer. This wasn't a thing like 100 years ago that people lived to 80, except in rare cases. Our whole systems aren't really built for it. I think 100, every time I'm wandering around, I'm just like, it's funny. I made it this far because most people are 100 years ago were dead by now. So it's one of those things where you're just like, we got to take care of ourselves. And it's good that we take care of each other. And that's a great story. So as we go out to tell people the .coms or socials or wherever you want them to find you on the interwebs one last time.
BeThereBook.com. I'm now on the YouTube channels and Spotify channels. Still marketing. There's a lot of, if you put Linsey Willis in there, a lot of my interviews are already out there just by typing my name in, and just sharing your knowledge, and also just buy the book on Amazon. And then when the Audible book comes out, the sales will go up, I'm sure. It's a great book. The reviews are great. Read the reviews on Amazon. They're not that many, but they're all 5s.
That's great.
The reviews are outstanding.
Thank you very much for coming on the show. We appreciate it.
I appreciate it, Chris, and thank you. It was a great interview, and have a great day. Thank you.
Thank you. You too. And folks, order up her book wherever fine books are sold. It's called Be There, My Lived Experience with My Sister's Bipolar Disorder, out September 10th, 2024, by Dr. Linsey Willis. Thanks so much for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. That was a crazy place on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the most amazing, intelligent podcast ever made to improve your brain and your life. Warning, consuming too much of the Chris Voss Show podcast can lead to people thinking you're smarter, younger, and irresistible sexy. Consume in regularly moderated amounts. Consult a doctor for any resulting brain bleed.
Doc, thanks.